part of our show where we engage in a little conversation because we had to hold back all of our comments in between.
Which is a challenge.
It is. Hopefully I remember what I was going to say. I'll need to say it first so I don't forget.
Yeah.
Okay.
3, 2, 1, go.
I don't know. That's very interesting about this whole idea of permission to be and giving ourselves permission, because it struck me this week and just kind of, rolling this in my brain that I spent a large portion of my life waiting to be given permission. And I'm not sure where that came from. I mean, I'm a little bit sure where that came from, but it's interesting. A lot of the things like wanting to step out in like my authentic self, I didn't because I was like, oh, should I? Or, what will people think? Or the expectations, or, and so then you kind of like yearn for people to give you permission to show up in this way. And you never actually get that because that's not how it works. And so, or I've been living based on the permissions of others. So I've been given permission to be this gender because this is what I was assigned. Or I was permission to be this religious tradition because this is how I grew up. Or I was given permission to be in this job because I had this degree and or all those sorts of things. And so then I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll just go along. Right. It's like, oh, I've got permission to do it. So might as well, so it wasn't really, not that some of those spaces weren't authentic, but there were lots of spaces where it wasn't. It was just this imposed permission to be a certain way. And so it was really an interesting kind of flip to me being the one that gives myself permission. And that's the only person that can do that. It's very empowering, terrifying in some aspects because often it's going in opposition to maybe previously lived experiences, but wow, isn't that a freeing experience though?
Yes, that whole opposition thing, like, so much of my life has felt like standing in opposition to what has been.
Yeah.
And what I realized finally, it can feel like, or has felt like at times, standing in opposition just for the sake of standing in opposition. But it's really not. It's the things that feel the strongest are the places where these are systems that are working against people.
Yeah.
Working against me, working against friends, working against whoever, right? And what I've realized is we are in a really weird, I think we're in a really weird place in time because life is trying to show up in a way that I think it hasn't shown up before, or is showing up in ways it hasn't shown up before. Not to say that those ways weren't ideas, that they weren't possibilities, that they weren't around. It just, life was so clearly like, this is the box for whatever reason. And now it's like, well, we are, that box is getting busted down and busted open. And at the same time, there's not models for like what that looks like. Right. So like, even trying to not be the thing that life says this is what you should be. Okay, cool. I'm not going to be that. Well, what am I? What am I going to be? How am I going? Who am I going to be? And like, that whole like looking for permission thing. It's like, your whole life as a kid, it's like, hey, can I go do this thing? Can I go hang out with wherever? Can I go to the movies? Can I whatever? Right. And I was never brought through any sort of like learning process of like how to not do that. Right. And I think that's that whole like emancipation thing in middle school, high school, whatever, of like rebelling against having to always ask. But there was no replacement process. Like there was no, and now like, I don't know, could there have been, if there were a model for it, could there have been a process that's like, okay, let's slowly wean off of having to always ask to go do or be or whatever. Like, I don't know what that could look like. Maybe it's like at a certain age, well, instead of having to ask if you can go to the backyard and play, if you have a backyard, it's you're allowed to, when you come home from school, go outside in the back without ask. I don't know, just like whatever, like there could be other ways of doing all that, but I think there are so many things like that that haven't been figured out, that there weren't models for, that we weren't guided through, that the like the rebellion exists, or we continue, like we continue looking for permission because that's the way it was. I don't know.
I think once we begin changing, and I think the language is beginning to change because authenticity, what is that? I mean, I didn't really
Yeah.
understand maybe what that meant, or that word wasn't something that was even in my vocabulary. And so I think as we began to um, the value of authenticity, the value of vulnerability, the value of showing up as we are, the value of not knowing what that is. We don't have to know. Like each day is a opportunity for self exploration, and so you know we've talked about this before. Authenticity today looks different than it will tomorrow because
Yeah.
we've learned more about ourselves. And so I think normalizing this understanding, normalizing the value of being who you are and that being okay, that you are uh, free to be, even though that's next week, so I don't want to give that away. But you're free to be who you are just by you have that right just by breathing and living.
Yeah.
And this understanding that we're all enhanced, like our collective experience is enhanced by everyone having the ability to live their authentic life.
Yeah.
And so somehow we've gotten a little sidetracked that we have determined what people's authentic life should look like. And I think this is kind of what we're talking about, like, oh, well, this person should do this and this person should do that, and all the shoulds, like if we could just kind of remove should from our vocabulary. I was recently teaching a class to greet some grief facilitators. And we talked about if we could just remove should from our vocabulary, oh man, that would be like the most impactful thing ever.
Yeah.
And I think it's true in this conversation too, removing the should or removing
Yeah.
the expected to be, um, then we can begin to like explore what does authenticity look like for me. And we don't have to have all the answers for that, but just beginning to ask the questions and giving ourselves permission to ask the questions or permission to not even know.
Right.
It's taken me quite a long time to be able to really embrace that authenticity. And I'm nowhere near perfection. Not that that's even a goal, but it is this process. There's no should in this process either, right? There's no should in the unpackaged process. There should in the giving self permission or living authentically. There's no shoulds in
Yeah.
any of this.
Yeah. We live in a really rules-based society, or a society with a tendency to having rules. It seems challenging to kind of be the ones, any of us, all of us, to be the one to go out and do something that is new to us, something that's new to our experience
It's
without,
uncomfortable. Yeah.
yeah, it is. It's uncomfortable, right? Without having the permission or the expectation or the a clear blueprint. It's kind of taking that like next blind step, like just the one next blind step, the next step, the next step, without really knowing, right? And I realized the one thing that comes to my mind about permission to be that we didn't speak of, neither of us spoke about in our segments really, is the giving ourselves not only the permission to be who we feel like we are, but the permission to be human. There are
Yeah.
so many parts about I don't know, I guess what I'd call like the human experience that we in New Thought have replaced this set of checkboxes with this set of checkboxes, and this new set of checkboxes seems great a lot of the time, except when you really get into it, a lot of it tries to negate the very experience of being human, and so much of the time, we hear this quote of like, we're spiritual beings having the human experience, which if you actually go look up the quote is only half of it, and if you read the other half of it, actually means the exact opposite of what it usually it means the exact opposite of the context in which it usually gets used. And really what it means is we are both spiritual and human, that the human experience is the spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And so we are here having the spiritual experience as humans, as spiritual beings that happen to be human. And so the entirety of the human experience is the spiritual experience, that there's not actually any difference. And for those of us who believe in oneness, which I think is a tenet in all new thought, like oneness must include all of it, everything, the whole thing,
Everything, everything.
and everything, right? So it's wholeness, right? You can't have oneness without wholeness. You don't
Yeah.
have the whole without all the parts and pieces.
Mhm.
And so giving ourselves yeah, sometimes you just
Ah,
get yeah, giving ourselves the permission to be human, to recognize all the parts and
yeah.
pieces in our lives, and like that's okay. It's okay if there are pieces, like there's parts of life that are in pieces. That's
Yeah.
also fine. you know I think it gets really clouded in this very like positivity only kind of thing.
Well, and I think too that, spirituality sometimes is used as this, like, tool to avoid discomfort. And yeah, that's not it either. And so when we're talking about, stepping into authenticity, we're talking about transformation and growth and all those things. None of that can happen without discomfort. It's just impossible. There's no growth without discomfort. So it's like we talk about this a lot. It's like where we are and where we're going in that little squidgy middle. And the
Mm,
squidgy middle is the discomfort because it's like stretching the present into the next thing. And that stretching is like, oh, that's uncomfortable, but I think it's
yeah.
and this permission to be is kind of that stretching, giving ourselves permission, like, this is what we've been told, but this is like our authentic selves and how we want to show up and express in the world. And it's that giving ourselves permission to kind of, okay, let's let go of this and then now step into this. And once we get on the other side, I think it's interesting because then it's a bit of momentum. Then we're like, oh, yeah, that feels so much better. And then it becomes this catalyst for us to do it again and again and again. And that doesn't mean that there's not discomfort in each of the agains, but then we're like, ah, this is where this discomfort comes in. Okay, I can hang on just for a little bit longer. And now here we are. And so it becomes this, we begin to relearn, begin
Yeah.
to train our awareness to the fact that that is a part of the experience. We're not always going to like it. I like it like 0% of the time. The squidgy middle. Yeah, it's not like, oh, let me go to the squidgy middle where I don't know what's going to happen. No, but if we can breathe in that moment, then we can begin to move into what is the next thing and the next thing. And I think living this unpackaged, authentic life is worth that. It may not feel like it in the moment, but I think
Yeah.
that overall feeling when we look back and say, "Ah, I have shown up as authentic as I know to show up
Yeah.
in any given moment."
And isn't that the perfect example of just how often I think we need to give ourselves permission?
Mm,
Like to even give ourselves permission to step into the discomfort, to step out of the comfortable and into the discomfort of not knowing.
yeah.
That's okay. Like give yourself permission to not know, because
Or to hate it, or to be mad about it.
yeah,
Any of
right.
those things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because I think so much of the expectation of being an adult is that you're supposed to know. You're supposed to now have, you are now an adult. You now need to have answers for everything, and you're supposed to have everything figured out and put together. And not
Uh-oh.
knowing is like a,
Uh-oh, we're not doing it right then.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I think just to like, none of that exists. None of that is real.
Yeah.
It's all made up. Nobody, the people who say that are the people who are like, don't look at me. Don't look at the fact that I don't have it together, because I am this thing that I say you should be.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Right, right. Yeah. So like giving ourselves permission to be uncomfortable, to not know, to be angry, to be mad, to be sad, to be happy, to whatever, like all of the things, whatever it is that's showing up. It's not just giving ourselves permission once to be
Mhm.
like, I'm going to give myself permission to be authentic. Okay, I'm set for life, right? Like it's, yeah, and giving ourselves permission anytime the next thing comes up,
Yeah, yeah,
and the next thing and the next thing and whatever it is that we weren't allowed to do, or we don't think we can be or should be, or we're not expected to be, or whatever. It just, we can, give ourselves permission to make an intentional choice whether we want to do or be that thing or not.
yeah.
But I think it's like it actually comes up all the
A
time.
lot.
A
You
lot.
know, very rarely do we give homework to the viewers out there, but I
Mm.
think anyone who is watching this, who will ever watch this, like, if you could just, like, over the next week, begin to look at some areas that you need to give yourself permission to be whatever in, and, like, just do the thing, like, write yourself out a permission slip like you would, like, a kid's field trip, you know? I give myself permission to feel blah, 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 or to be blah, 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 whatever. I'm telling you, it is like it may seem silly, but it really creates this habit that we're talking about of just giving ourselves permission to be who we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good stuff.
So thank you for being here and hanging out with us, talking about what it might look like to give ourselves permission to be human, to be real, to be authentic, to be comfortable, to be uncomfortable, to be happy, to be sad, to be all of the things. And like Reverend Ryan just said, we don't often give homework, but this week we are. So do pay attention. Where are the things in your life that you are looking for permission to be, to do, to go, to whatever, and then give yourself that permission. Write it out. Write out a permission slip. I give myself permission to be the thing, and see what happens. See how your experience shifts. If you are looking for more of this conversation or conversations like this, go over to soulevolutioncollaborative.org. Check out the events page. Check out more than the events page, because there's a lot of new stuff happening online on our website. We have a couple of new series, couple of new pages posted with some new information coming out. We've really honed this idea of unpackaged life. And so check it out, see what's there, see how it might be helpful for you, see how it transforms your experience of life. So thanks again for being here. And if we don't see you on Thursday for the gathering or sometime in between, we will see you next week right here again at Truth Be Told 2.0.